Connie Willis, the podcast. Taking you into new ways of thinking, even providing answers to questions you've often pondered. Connie Willis, the podcast.
I cannot believe it. No, it's no big deal. Not at all. I'm just glad you're there now. I was kind of hoping that.
I just brain rot.
Brain rot, and you're the guy we all respect to know all this stuff because of that brain. And now I know the truth. It's just all rotted out. So how are you, David? Otherwise,
good. Just a little bit frazzled because I forgot about that.
That's okay. It's not a big deal. Again, we don't have another one till 7. I just got off the phone not long ago with Roger Lear and his implant procedure from over the weekend and some of the other ones. And he said to tell you hello, as you had said.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, and what are your thoughts again about him and his work?
Well, I think he does good work, and I'm glad that he does what he does do. The problem is the objects that he retrieves. You know, it's very difficult to prove that they're directly related to abduction material, abduction events, and I think that you have to sort of show function of the objects, and then you'll have something more important. But somebody's got to do it, and I'm glad that Roger's doing it.
Have you guys ever worked together with a patient?
Well, no. He's in Los Angeles, and I'm in Philadelphia, so.
Yeah, I just figured maybe one of the people you've ever talked with might have had. If you know of one that has an implant, would you send them to him, or just?
Well, yes, if the person lived in L.A., but there's Yvonne Smith in L.A. who can probably relay people over to him.
Oh, okay. Have you ever relayed anybody over to somebody there in Philly? Have you
No,
ever dealt
I
with
haven't.
implants?
The problem here is that implants are usually in 3 characteristic spots. Up by the pituitary gland, which goes through the nasal passage and through the cartilage, and through the eardrum somewhere near the brain, and then into a sinus cavity through the tear duct. And there haven't been a whole lot of people who have volunteered to have their head sawed open.
I guess that's a good answer then.
Right.
Each one of the ones that you just spoke about, why are they in those particular areas?
Well, when you start asking those why questions, we know the answer to some why questions, but when it comes to technology, that is to say, for years and years and years, we've been hearing all sorts of machine type of procedures that are performed on people, and implants and all sorts of other equipment, and throughout the entire history of the abduction phenomenon, we really don't know anything about their technology at all. They don't tell abductees, and therefore abductees don't tell us. So we don't know what implants are for or why they're placed where they are placed. We can guess in some ways that near the pituitary gland might be in some way to monitor hormones of some sort. We can guess that one of those implants might be a tracking device, but my guess is that they're very, very complicated and very sophisticated devices that do a multitude of things. But those are just guesses. We really don't know, which is why you have to show function. You have to ultimately have an object and you can figure out what it does. And if you can do that, then I think the world might be a little bit different afterwards.
Well, I just had a question, and you just popped in my mind, and then I had another question and another question. I'm always so excited to talk to the people I've always looked up to, and I definitely feel that way about you. I know you have researched for a long time. You don't speculate. You just kind of give the facts.
Well, I try to, and of course I've been looking into the UFO and abduction phenomenon since the mid-1960s, and I'm already 102 years old.
I know.
So it's been a long haul.
You look fantastic for your age.
I'm well preserved.
That. Okay, contactee abductee, experiencer. What are the differences?
Well, thank you for that question. That's a question that is rarely asked. An abductee is a person who's had a lifelong series of abduction events. Contactee, you have to use that word divided into two areas. In the 1950s, there was the rise of the so-called contactees. Most of these kind of people were charlatans, con men, people trying to make a buck off of UFOs. They took, quote, rides in flying saucers. They went to the moon, they went to Mars, they went to Venus, they went to Neptune, so forth and so on. They had ongoing conversations with space brothers, and this is charlatanism, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the abduction phenomenon.
Did they actually make money saying that?
Oh yeah, they went. There was a convention circuit. They wrote books. They sold souvenirs, photographs, and all sorts of things. Buck Nelson sold packets of Martian dog hair. He was a Martian dog for $5 a packet. And legitimate UFO researchers spent all their time, all their money, and all their energy in the UFO organizations trying to combat the contactees, and so being a contactee was sort of a dirty word. It's come back for people who feel that they've been in contact with aliens, but who don't think that they're abductees.
Okay.
Almost always, this is through channeling or something like that. And sometimes they are abductees, but they really only remember snippets of what's happened to them, and they've never really had a serious investigation by a competent researcher. And they think that they've been in some way contacted. Now, the problem here is that the abduction phenomenon begins in infancy and goes into old age, and it's much more frequent than we had ever imagined when we first started looking into it. So the concept of contact for abductees is simply not a concept. They are just abductees ever since they've been born, essentially. So the whole idea of contact, the Carl Sagan book Contact, and all these other ideas of contact, all that is popular culture in terms of the abduction phenomenon. That's just all. It doesn't mean anything for people who are abductees. Now, the word experiencer was an attempt some years ago to get rid of the sort of harshness of the word abductee there, because some people don't like to be known as by the form of abductee. In other words, their entire identity is just because they're abductees. They've been abducted. They're in the abduction phenomenon.
So this is politically correct.
Well, no. The problem is that the people who insisted on using the word experiencer had a hidden agenda.
Oh.
And the agenda was that the aliens were wonderful, benevolent. They were here to help us. They were good people, good aliens. There might be some bad aliens out there, you never know. But these were the good ones, and they're fighting off the bad ones sometimes. And this whole sort of mythology of abduction came about by people who just kept insisting that the abduction phenomenon was really benevolent at heart. And so they used the word experiencer because there was a certain harshness to abductee, because it suggested abduction, which suggests kidnapping, which suggests a crime, all the rest of that. So they decided on the word experiencer. And the word experiencer is not used by serious abduction researchers because, it's such a wide-ranging word that if a person is raped, you can say, well, they're an experiencer. They experienced rape. And in other words, it can be used for almost anything. And it does not, therefore, suggest that the abduction phenomenon. So I guess the best way to say it is an abduction experiencer.
Okay. Well,
if you combine those two words, which nobody has done, and I just use abductee. I mean, it's not the best word, but it's a word that has lasted for decades and decades now, and it's sort of settled law. It's hard to get.
Well, people know exactly what that means. When you hear experiencer, you're like, what? Because I felt the same way. I thought, when I very first heard it, I thought, wow, it sounds like this is kind of a nice thing, that you like this.
Right, and that was the agenda, which tried to replace the wording to soften everything. But unfortunately, the evidence does not simply lend itself to experiencer, even though I dislike the word abductee myself.
Yeah.
I wish there was a better word, but we just don't have one.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, it seems like, from what I gather after reading your material, looking it over, that you don't have a positive outcome with this.
Well, when I first started looking into this subject back, I was a disbeliever in abductions for most for forever, it seemed, and it wasn't until 1982 when I became acquainted with Bud Hopkins. Even though in 1981 I was present in the room when he was about to give his very first paper about the abduction phenomenon at a conference at Northwestern University, through the auspices of the new Center for UFO Studies. And rather than sit there and waste my time listening to some guy warble on about abductions, which of course were obviously psychological, I elected to stand out in the hallway with my friend Marcello Truzzi, who was a professor of sociology at Eastern Michigan University, and tell jokes with him, literally, because he had thousands of jokes stored in his mind. He was absolutely amazing when it came to that. Rather than listen to Bud Hopkins' account of abductions. So it wasn't until a year later when I was actually sort of formally met him and went to his house through a mutual friend who insisted that I do that, that I became interested in the abduction phenomenon in '82. And I didn't start doing my own hypnosis until '86. And once I started doing my own work, then I began to realize that this was something that was happening. I couldn't dismiss the evidence as I had done before.
What did Bud say that turned you onto it? I mean, he's very highly respected as well. You guys do a lot of things together. What did he say that kind of turned you?
Well, he was very, very, very intelligent, and that is something that I was sort of taken aback by, and his take on the abduction phenomenon was very carefully considered. At the time I met him, he was not doing his. I guess he might have started doing his own hypnosis. He might not have, but he was working with a psychologist named Aphrodite Claymore who was doing the hypnosis, so that there was no agent in any way. And he introduced me to some abductees, and they were perfectly normal individuals. And of course, if you think that you're being abducted by denizens of another planet on a routine basis, you can't be normal if it's not happening. There's got to be a perceptual problem. You've got to have some sort of difficulty differentiating between fantasy and reality. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's got to be a major problem. It can't be minor. It's got to be a major problem. And that was not what was happening. It turns out that just by coincidence, and I do believe in coincidence, we were going up to a small town in Cape Cod called Wellfleet for our vacation because we just had a baby in '86, and it was too far to drive with that kid, with the baby, to Maine, where we normally went for a couple of weeks for our summer vacation. And turns out that Bud lives in Wellfleet during the summer. He owns a house in Wellfleet, to my amazement. And so he asked me to look him up when we came up there, and I did. And then he introduced me to more people, and I sat in on a hypnosis session and so forth and so on. And it took me a while. Like I said, it took me it took me 4 years after meeting him to finally resolve to do my own hypnosis.
Wow.
And but Bud is just a terrific person, and he's my closest friend in the world.
Right. Well, you guys are just two fantastic men that are highly respected in this area. For those listening out there right now, you're listening to High Strangeness Radio. If you'd like to also give us a call and chime in, not a problem. Right now we are talking to Associate Professor of History at Temple University. This is David Jacobs. Very happy to have him on the show, and the number to call is 1-800-STRANGE. Now, as we move on here, I'd love to ask you, if you can tell the listeners, how would you describe who you are? Because I don't know, how would you put what you do outside of Temple University on a resume? What would you say? Have you ever done that?
Well, let's put it this way. You'll notice that I am Associate Professor of History. Now, nobody knows what that means. That means I'm a professor with tenure. I have job security. I've been teaching at Temple since 1975, and before that I taught at the University of Nebraska for a year. And an assistant professor is a professor without tenure. And then there's something called full professor, where your official title is not associate professor. Your official title is just plain professor. And that's the highest rung you can go on the professorship ladder, and you have to have national reputation in your field and all the rest of that. And I will never be full professor. That will never happen. And that's not for want of trying. No, I've published 2 academic press books and 2 books with Simon & Schuster. But the subject itself is not, let's just say, respected in all of academia. Temple University is no different than any other university, and I have taught the only course on the subject of UFOs and abductions, a full credit upper level of course that's routinely taught. In fact, I'm teaching it this semester since 1977. The only one in the United States at a university. And the problem is that I teach from a believer's point of view. Mm-hmm. If I taught it from a skeptic's point of view or from a debunker's point of view, I probably would be full professor. But therefore have a higher salary, et cetera, et cetera. But
can't you just fake it for a semester and get that money?
Well, I knew that going in that there would be sacrifices that had to be made. I knew that this was not going to be good. I knew that starting to write about abductions and things like that was just not the best career move I could have made.
I'm glad they're allowing you to do it, though.
Well, it's not for want of trying on their part to stop me. I have all sorts of adventures I could write about my adventures with Temple University and this course and all that sort of stuff. It hasn't been easy, but people realize that I'm serious about it, and that I'm not a loony or a nutcase or something like that. At least I don't think I am.
Not that we're going to tell you. Not in front of you. Well, how would you describe yourself in that area? What is it that you?
Well, I'm an abduction researcher. That's the way I describe myself now. I used to be a UFO researcher for many years, and now I'm an abduction researcher, and that's all I do.
Excellent.
And the thing is that the problem here is that UFOs and abductions are the same thing. In other words, UFOs are here to abduct people, from what we can tell. We can't seem to figure out any other pathway of knowledge that would make sense other than the abduction phenomenon. We've known since 1957 that when we first had our first abduction case, which was the Antonio Villas-Boas case in Brazil, and most other cases that we've looked at, that there is a strong reproductive aspect to this phenomenon. And a lot of this work was pioneered by Bud Hopkins in the early 80s. And that reproductive aspect has led to the creation of what people describe as odd-looking babies who look sort of half human, half alien. And those babies then grow up, and they're toddlers when they're young people, and they're adolescents, and then they're young adults, and then they're adults. And then we don't see them as older adults for reasons we don't understand. And so, to show you how specialized I am, right now I am really specialized in studying hybrids. That's what I'm mostly interested in, because that's where everything is at, I think.
Have you ever seen a picture or just drawings?
I've seen a picture of a photograph of a guy who was purportedly a hybrid. but it's not half human, half alien. This is a long and involved story. But what they've done is they have early stage hybrids who look quite alien. There's middle stage hybrids who look sort of half and half. There's late stage hybrids who look pretty human, only slightly different. And then there's human stage hybrids who look really, really human. And I've seen a photograph of one of those, and what you look at, just some average guy, period. I mean,
that's it, no difference.
Right, you can't take this picture to the New York Times and say, here a person who was born, who was created on a UFO and is a hybrid. And supposing you're wrong and the person sues the hell out of you, you know what I mean? It's not an easy one to nail down, even with photographs. And of course, I have lots of drawings and all that sort of stuff, and they just look like pretty much average people.
Okay, and been nice enough to send those to us. We're going to be putting them up on the website, so you can check that out at highstrangeness.com. Don't forget, give us a call and speak to David Jacobs yourself here at Strange, 1-800-STRANGE. All talking about high strangeness events, and we definitely have one here, and we're talking about abductees and really what they go through. This isn't laughing at. This is not going, ooh, you know, this is spooky. This is real stuff, and it is not. Well, I'll let you tell it, David, because. Well,
you're
how
doing
does
such
it?
a good job.
Well, you know, it's so. You know, when you know you have been studying it, so you really are into it, and you know exactly what you've learned firsthand. Myself, I've heard it from so many different people, and I've heard the people that say, oh, it's of a higher consciousness. Oh, life and Earth is going to change, and this is going to be the best thing that ever happened, and they're here to save us. You don't have that view. What is it that actually happens? Okay, if I feel I have something happening to me, and I go to you because I've heard that, hey, here's a guy to go to, because I can't tell anybody else. They're going to laugh at me. They're going to think I'm a freak, and that's one of the big problems. And so,
it's a major problem.
And the people that come to you, I mean, how many people don't come to you?
Well, that's a hard one to answer. However, there is an answer that I can formulate out of that. When people, you know, I work primarily with people who are within a 100-mile radius of my house. And because I see them over and over again for as long as they want. I don't charge for anything I do. They can stop anytime they want. And a lot of people just come once and that's it, you know. But I put them through a sort of pathway where they have to write answer questions on a questionnaire that I have on my website, and they have to then find the pros and the cons of it, and be advised about, you know, the difficulties of memory recall. And some people sort of react very negatively to it, and they sort of go off the beam a little bit. Most obviously don't. And but my own style of questioning is as agenda-free as I can possibly make it. In other words, my major question is, what happens next? And what happens is they'll describe this and that, and I can only ask questions about what they're describing. And so if they say I'm in a room, I can ask, how big is the room? Is it light? Is it dark? What do you see in the room? You know, things like that. And then whenever they answer, I can ask questions about that and so forth. So I try to be as clear as possible and as chronological as possible as well, so they know how they got there, they know what happened when they're there, they know how they got back, and there's a sort of a completeness to it. I have no stake in what I found. In other words, what I found is kind of an agenda that these beings. But if I were to find something that is benevolent and they're here to help us and cure cancer and stop war, that would be wonderful. Mm-hmm. I have nothing against that. That would be terrific. That would be a dream come true.
And if they're here to save us, fantastic.
Yeah, but
Good.
Unfortunately, that is not what people tell me. I'll tell you a little story. I once had a woman who was very, very, very heavily structured within the New Age world. So much so that it was almost difficult to talk with her because her language was so New Agey. I couldn't figure out various things she was saying. She was so heavily into it. But she came to me and she wanted to find out what had happened to her, and we did 2 sessions together. In the first session, she was taken over as object, and this happened, and that happened, and this happened, and that happened, and this happened, and that happened, and it was all very standard stuff that she had totally forgotten about it. And then in the second session, well, this happened, and that happened, and this happened, and that happened, and this happened. It was all pretty much standard stuff again, just like everybody else says. And then she's angry because she hadn't remembered what she wanted to have.
Whoa.
And she said she wasn't coming to see me anymore because I wasn't fulfilling what her expectations were. But all I was doing was saying, "Well, what happens next?" So she could have dived into whatever she wanted to, but it just wasn't there. And so like I say, it doesn't bother me if people have wonderful experiences. That's okay. I haven't had that, and I notice that people who do feel that it is this way all have 3 things, one or all 3 things in common. Number one, they're consciously remembered events. They have not worked with a hypnotist to understand what exactly happened to them, and with consciously remembered events, people think that within the abduction phenomenon, if you could only just remember it and not have hypnosis, everything would be wonderful because everybody realizes how the difficulties of hypnosis. I mean, people are vulnerable and they're suggestible and all that sort of thing. But the problem is that consciously recalled events are notoriously inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they are so inaccurate, there's no relation to what people remember and what actually happens to them at all. And most of the times there is a relationship of sorts. They realize right away they got it wrong, that they had events exposed, that this didn't happen and something else happened. And they tell me right away, oh, this is not what I thought had happened, and all that.
Number 3?
Well, the third problem that people have when they come with a benevolent sort of idea about this whole phenomenon is that they go to a hypnotist who doesn't necessarily have an agenda, but doesn't understand what is happening in the abduction field, doesn't understand what people are saying, and unfortunately people will confabulate. They say things that are not true. They think that they're true, but they say things that aren't true, and it's up to the experienced and competent hypnotist who knows something about the abduction phenomenon to challenge them on that, or at least to investigate that closely to make sure that that is exactly what is happening. And when people confabulate with an inexperienced hypnotist, they don't understand that, and they just go with what the person is saying, and then it inevitably leads to their own expectations of the abductees' expectations of a benevolent, kind, loving type of alien and all that. And they all have that in common. For people who go to serious hypnotists who know what they're doing, who are competent in the area, and know about the abduction phenomenon, and know what is normally said and what isn't and all that, then you just get a more agenda-free thing, and it coincides with what everybody else is getting. And it's neither bad nor good, but it does fulfill an alien agenda. And it's not they're here for us, they're here for them. That's the major difference.
I cannot wait to get into that with you. But before that, I have so many things, of course, to say to you. Do you study NLP at all, neuro-linguistic programming? I'm sure.
No, I have never done that. Never done that. No.
That it's a lot of indicators of when people speak the truth or not. I would think that would really help you.
Well, the people who I work with really don't want to speak lies. They're very careful about it. Right. Now, I must say that I have a horrible elitist bias. I work with anybody and everybody, people who are literally 6th grade dropouts. It's literally true, and 9th grade dropouts, and people who have PhDs, MDs, and all sorts of other degrees and so forth. Now, I prefer to work with people who have PhDs and MDs.
Well, yeah, it really helps us get out the word, doesn't it, that way?
Well, it's not just that. It's just that they tend to get they can grasp the big picture a little bit quicker, and they're very, very careful on what they say, and they know the problems of hypnosis and all the rest of that stuff. So people don't want to lie, and they're not interested in bad information and bad data. They want to know exactly what happened to them, and I don't want to, lead them into anything. That's the last thing I want. I don't want bad data either.
Exactly, and I'm not even talking that they're lying. It's more that sometimes they, I think you've even alluded that sometimes they kind of create something in their own mind that really isn't there, or they want it to be there?
Yeah, it's both. Sometimes it isn't there at all, and sometimes they want it to be there, and it's still not there.
Well,
and then again, there are people who do remember things fairly accurately.
Yeah.
They'll remember bits and pieces of abduction events pretty accurately. It's rare, extremely rare, that they'll remember an entire abduction event from beginning to end. That's almost unheard of. But maybe there are some people out there like that.
Well, you know what? I got to tell you that, like, women, male and female, we women, if you guys did something on a date 20 years ago, or you did something on the wedding night, we'll remember absolutely every detail. So does it matter when you're under hypnosis? Does it matter with the abductees if they're male or female? Does it make a difference who remembers more? Just by chance?
No, it does not make a difference, actually. However, more female, I work with more females than males. I think it's like 60-40. And the reason, I think, is that females are abducted more because the reproductive procedures involve females more than males, so they're abducted more. And also, I think females come forward because, and now I'm on very shaky ground, because for men, it's almost a mark of weakness to come forward, to think that something is happening to you that you can't have control over. And women, I think, tend to talk about their problems with other women more than men talk about their problems with other men.
I don't believe any bit of that. No, totally. I totally agree with you on that. When you talk about hypnosis, is there a difference when you talk to that person the first time and then, one that sticks with you for quite a while? Does it matter? Does it make a difference when you talk to them the 20th, 30th time?
It really does. It really does. The first session is always, for me, now other people might disagree with me about this, it's sort of a throwaway session. They're scared to death of hypnosis. They think that they're going to blurt out the innermost personal details of their lives, and they don't know what's going to happen. They think they're going to be in some sort of a trance, and they'll be under my control and all that. And so the first session, they just get sort of used to hypnosis, and they realize and this is by scientific measurement, it is exactly 1 gazillionth of a millimeter away from being totally fraudulent altogether. It's just words. That's all. And people get really relaxed, and they get focused, and they follow along with the words I'm saying, and then they begin to remember these things. Now, why this works, I don't know. I don't know. It's people. There's been studies just recently which have noticed some sort of brain changes a little bit, but it's still fairly ill understood scientifically. But it is just words, and it's not like I'm injecting some sort of drug through the top of their skull or anything like that.
Not that you're admitting to right now, but what you're doing, you're talking to the subconscious, and from what we all know is
I'm not even talking to the subconscious.
No.
They're laying there thinking, that's the stupidest question I ever heard in my life. I'm not going to answer that question. Or they're really saying, God, if I answer this question, and I know the truth, they tell me this, he'll think I'm crazy, so I'll just skip that one. In other words, they're self-censoring all the way through in the first couple of sessions because they don't want to seem like they're crazy. And a lot of them think that they're not under hypnosis at all, and they get up and they say, I have to go to the bathroom, and they get up and they go to the bathroom, they come back and they lay back down, and I just continue their question. It doesn't really even matter. However, that's the first question, the first session. The second session, they're used to hypnosis, but it's still difficult to remember some things. Third session, it's a lot easier. By the fourth session, it's considerably easier, and by that time, I will start doing some of the major events that they remember, because I know if I do a triggering episode that they remembered something happening 30 years ago and they've thought about it every day of their life, it's too important for them to do in the first couple of sessions. So I'll wait till like the fourth or fifth session and do that. By the 20th session, if they have the gumption to stay with me for 20 sessions, it's conversational. Mm-hmm. It's questions and answers and all the rest of that stuff, but it becomes more conversational because they are now used to the abduction phenomenon, and they are now understanding what is happening to them, and they'll ask me questions and I'll answer, and even during hypnosis, so it becomes a much more conversational style, and it's much easier in a sense. In other words, I'm not interested in being an interrogator, and so the conversational style comes much more easy to me.
Well, David, it sounds like too that really it's a trust issue too. You two have built a relationship at that point.
Right, and that's what does happen. Now, even then, I am still sticking to my pattern. I'm still only asking questions about what they say, and I'm not trying not to lead them anywhere. And there's something else as well. In the first several sessions, and even in later sessions, what you do is you ask a series of purposely misleading questions, knowing the answers to these questions, which is usually, it didn't happen. And so you'll ask a question, now this is very important. In every abduction event that I've looked at, there is a being who looks kind of strange, and he's dressed all in yellow, and he usually stands in one area of the room, and he never moves, and he's wearing glasses or something like that. You can see him, can't you? That's a direct misleading question. And I know I'm doing it. And if they say yes, there's a problem. Then I have to be extra careful. But most of them, 99.99999% of them, I've only had one person, let's put it this way, who's ever said anything like that. But in all of them, they say, no, I don't see anybody like that.
Yeah. And I might have missed them. I might have blinked.
Right, but
no.
Or you'll tell them simple things like, well, if you're lying on a table, can you see the ceiling? Yes, I can see the ceiling. Well, can you see the ceiling where it sort of hits the wall? Can you see that sort of that corner where the wall comes straight down? Where the ceiling is? And they'll say, no, I don't see that. It's all round, and the ceiling and the wall are really the same thing. In other words, they describe what everybody else describes, even though I've asked them another direct, misleading question, as if this is what is common. And so there's all sorts of other things you do to make sure that these people are not suggestible and not vulnerable.
Right.
And they're not. They come to me. They know about hypnosis. They know they don't want to be led. And they don't want to pick up things in popular culture and then say it back to me as if it happened to them. They're aware of that, and I don't want that to happen either.
Right. Exactly.
But there is a difference in the way in which I question people when they've been with me for, I've had one person who's been with me on and off since 1987. And
wow, you've had to learn a lot from that one.
Right, and I've dealt with one woman who was abducted constantly, and we did sessions very, very, very frequently. And so, it's once the trust is there, and once they understand what hypnosis is, and once they understand that I'm not going to make them think that they're a teapot or a parrot or a chicken or something like that, they focus on their memories, not so much on me, just on their memories.
Right. Heck, from what you hear, it's really the ETs that are doing that. They're the ones that have paralyzed their mind or whatever they have done to where they forget. So let's go there. If you can take me to what is pretty much the standard, I guess. I don't even know if that's what you would say, but what is the average? What happens averagely with these guys? Because I know it's going to be different, and I know different. There's kind of different abductions. It's not all grays, but it seems like that's their plan of attack.
Right. Well,
but what happens to these guys? It's always when they're sleeping, and then they get taken up.
No. The majority, not by much, I must say, but the majority of abductions that I have looked at have not been when they're sleeping, and have been might have been at night, but they might have been watching television or reading, or during the daytime, and in a car, in the daytime or whatever, when they're not sleeping. The whole idea that happens only when they're sleeping is just not true, and I know that sleep paralysis people think that is true, but they just don't know anything about the abduction phenomenon.
Okay.
But the majority of ones I've looked at have not been when they're sleeping, and however, a standard abduction scenario is just a person taken out of their normal environment, whether it's their living room or their backyard or their car or their bed, and and they're taken on board an object. Their clothes are removed, and usually in a special room. Now, it depends on the size of the object. If the object is very, very small, let's just say 30 feet in diameter, and there's only one table there, they're put up on a table.
Well, before you get to the table, how are they taken? Are they taken up in the beam of light? Do these grays come and grab them and take them up, or?
Yeah, at night they report a beam of light, and in the daytime, not necessarily, because it's too bright outside.
Right,
See what
sure.
I mean? Yep, that's what it is. It's a form of energy that just sort of takes people up. What we're looking at here is future physics, and that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is if they're in their home. Let's say it is at night, and they're laying in bed and they're reading a novel or something like that. What happens? How do they get out of their room? And I learned this very, very early on. In fact, in some of the first people I ever looked at. And they said, well, these beings are in the room now, and then they're getting me out of bed. Well, now you can ask a million questions. Are they pulling back the covers? Are you getting out 1 foot at a time?
Right.
Are you floating out of bed? There's all sorts of things. How do you get out of bed? And now I'm walking towards the window. Well, once again, you can ask, you're walking fast, you're walking slow.
Right.
So now I'm going. There's two of them. There's one on one side, one on the other side, and there's one still behind me, or three of them, whatever it is. Okay, now I'm going to the window, and I'm going up. I said, wait, hold on for a second. This is early on. This is like my 1986, 87. These questions come from. When you approach the window, do you open the window? Open the window? They'll say, no, I don't open the window. I say, well, do these beings open the window? No, they don't open the window. Well, does the window open by itself in some odd way? No, they say, I think I'm floating right through the closed window. And now they'll tell me that today, and they'll say, some people turn to me and say, has anybody else ever reported that? And the answer is, everybody reports that.
Mm.
They go through a wall, or they go through the ceiling. Everybody reports that. Everybody. There are virtually no exceptions to this. Now, here's the interesting part about that. There is no reason on this earth, so to speak, to say, well, of course I open the window. Because if you open the window, your story is more believable.
Mm-hmm.
By saying you're going through a closed window, it just adds a barrier to belief.
Exactly.
There's no reason to do that. So you'd think that at least some cases, if not the majority of cases, will say, yeah, I had to open the window first, and then we went right out the window. But that is something we do not hear. So just that little fact of going through the window sounds kind of crazy, but everybody says it, even though they know it's crazy.
So all that money they spend on these locks for their windows, just forget that. Save it, put it somewhere else, pay off some bills.
Well, it's not only that, but people who don't know what's going on will sleep with knives and guns under their pillow, and they're afraid to go to sleep at night if they think it's going to happen at night, and they'll wait up. They know something's going to happen. They know something's going to happen. They'll wait up until it's dawn, and nothing happens. I mean,
Right.
that's sort of the secret life of abductees.
Right. Okay, so they get up there, and then they take their clothes off.
Yes. Now, if it's a small room, they take the clothes off and just drop them right on the floor by the table. If it's a larger object, and most of them are larger, there's a special room to take their clothes off, and there might be other people from the neighborhood sitting in that room, and the objects, the people who are doing the abducting, work a neighborhood basically, and so they might even recognize the neighbor or something. Usually they don't, but sometimes they do. And so everybody's sitting there naked, sort of glassy-eyed. They're under control. They're rendered passive even before the event started when they were in their room.
Are they embarrassed at all? Do they even notice it? No? Okay.
No, not embarrassed at all. This has happened to them since they were kids.
Mm.
It's over and over and over and over and over again. They're not embarrassed at all. they eventually, a gray alien will come in and take one out and take them over to a table. We used to think that the examination phase, which is lying on a table and so forth, and being examined, was the reason for abductions. And now we know it is never the reason for abductions. It's exactly the opposite. It's always just a preliminary to the reason why they brought them there. Now, they might have brought them there to take eggs, to take sperm, or to do a fetal implantation, or to do a fetal extraction. And these are for processes are reported by virtually everyone, and have been since in one way or another since 1957. So early on, we understood this reproductive aspect of it, and that might be the reason why they're there. However, generally speaking, there are other procedures as well. Now, it depends on the size of the ship, once again. It depends on the size of the UFO. If it is an extremely large UFO, let's just say half a mile across or something like that, then they're going to be there longer and more events are going to happen. If it's an extremely small one, they're going to be there for a shorter time and less events will happen.
Makes sense.
So then they get them off the table eventually after they do whatever they need to do, and they take them into a room. They might show them an incubator room, an incubatorium as I call it, with tanks of liquid and fetuses floating in the liquid in different stages of development. Some look like they're ready to be taken out. I can't say the word born, but I can say taken out of the tank. And other ones are just small fetuses. Then why they take them in and show them this and indicate some of these are yours or something like that, we do not understand. This is a very common event, and we do not understand why this happens. It seems bizarre. However, we have learned that everything that seems bizarre in this phenomenon is just because we don't know. That's why it seems bizarre. Once we learn about these things, then it's not bizarre at all. It's perfectly logical and rational, and we understand it.
Right,
But,
and that's in the way we think. Who knows what they think? Maybe that's very normal. We don't know how they think.
well,
They're not
we
thinking
know
human.
that they must have logic and rationality because they have advanced technology. Therefore, they must, 2 and 2 has got to equal 4, and they must. This is a superior type of being in some ways, and so they must have logic and rationality. They can't not have it, otherwise they wouldn't have technology. And but what we've learned is that everything is rational. There is a reason for everything. This is an extremely well thought out program. So the things we don't understand is just because we don't know.
You don't know yet. Okay.
So
they show them all.
they show them that, then they take them into another room. There might be a series of maybe 20 babies arrayed out in another room, or maybe as many as 30 or 40 or even 50, or just one. And they have to hold a baby, and they have to sometimes feed a baby, and I used to think that that was impossible because you have a person who's never been married and is not lactating. It's very difficult to feed a baby. But in fact, we've learned that they've already stimulated lactation on the table, and the woman will indicate that if you know what questions to ask and all.
Oh, so they don't have a baby bottle.
No. They have breasts,
Gotcha.
and that's it. And so they'll feed the baby, and then
It's almost like a nurturing process there, isn't it?
well,
It's like let's touch and.
we don't know. We know that we don't know. There is a touching process because there's got to be skin-on-skin contact with the baby. And this is important. In fact, one early case I had, a woman absolutely refused to feed the baby or even want to hold it. And so they grabbed her hand and they forced her hand onto the baby's stomach, and they held it there for 30 seconds or 50 seconds or whatever it was. And then they said, okay, that's fine. They took her hand off of her. So there's got to be, I don't know, I do not understand why, but there's got to be some sort of skin-on-skin contact with these babies. And some of them are really quite, most of them look in the middle. These are middle-stage hybrids.
Okay.
But, and the interesting thing about this phenomenon is that we've never seen a baby gray. or a young gray or an old. We don't know how they reproduce. So when we take a look at them, there's no reproductive organs, and we do not know how they reproduce at all. They might just be stamped out of a die or something, and we just don't know. It is an unknown.
Right.
So, then they might be shown. They might be taken into a room and shown a screen. And on the screen, their attention is directed to it, and they're sort of still glassy-eyed and slack-jawed, under control. They can't run. They can't kick or anything like that. And it doesn't even occur to them to do that. And on the screen, there's a variety of things. The most prominent thing is catastrophic things happening, the earth breaking in half, armies fighting, people dying, a meteor hitting the earth, floods, pestilence, plagues, whatever. We don't know what this is for. We don't understand this. But oftentimes they're showing pictures of a normal kind of human activity. For example, and this I wrote about this one in a book. For example, a picnic, and there are people standing around a grill, and there are people playing with a ball. There's grass. There's a picnic table. They're talking, that sort of stuff, and they'll hear in their mind's ear, because all communication, and once again, this is one of these odd all things. All communication is telepathic with gray beings, gray aliens, and even hybrids on board the object. It's all telepathic, so they'll hear in their mind, can you tell the difference between you and us? And they'll look carefully, and they'll say, what do you mean, difference? Everybody looks the same to me, there's no difference.
Oh.
And they'll say, see, isn't that wonderful? Soon we will all be together. Soon everybody's going to be happy. Soon it's going to be wonderful. Soon it's going to be terrific. Soon we'll all be together.
Wow.
Now, the first time I heard that, you just put it on the back burner waiting for validation from other people, verification, same thing. And if it never comes up again, it didn't happen. It was confabulation of some sort. But other people began to tell me that, and then more people began to tell me that, and I began to hear it in different forms, and it was always soon we'll all be together, and I eventually came to the conclusion that soon we'll all be together.
Wow, that's scary.
It's not what I wanted to hear.
No,
I have to admit,
no.
it's about the last thing I wanted to hear. And the problem here is a person sitting in his room watching television and realizing something is happening. That's the problem. The problem is that the person says, uh-oh, what's going on, and can do nothing about it. Can't call 911, can't reach under the pillow and get the Magnum 44, can't do anything. In other words, they are controlled neurologically, and they are controlled from a distance. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know whether the distance is 1,000,000 miles or 100 miles or 10 feet, but it is from a distance. Then these beings come in, and the person is kept under control all the way through the abduction event, and then as soon as it's over, the person forgets what happened. That is all a matter of neurology. It's all a matter of neurological control. And the problem is that the ones who look sort of human-like, who would be integrating into the society, can't do that also. So they can control us, but we can't control them.
Is it all through the mind, the telepathy there that you're talking about, how they do that?
We don't know. It's not necessarily telepathy, no. It's just neurological manipulation. So it's not a matter of communication. It's a matter of just rendering somebody passive or making them see something that isn't there, which is another neurological procedure. Or there's all sorts of... In other words, their knowledge of human of neurology is mind-boggling, and their ability to control it is something we cannot understand. But without that ability to control people neurologically, there would be no abduction phenomenon.
That's exactly right.
That has to take place. It has to, and it does.
And you're saying that the hybrids, that they will, when the human ones come down, the ones that look human, they should have that ability.
They do have that ability. It's not as strong as the gray aliens, I must say, but it's good enough.
Well, is that what the hybrid's all about? Is that like, okay, we're going to take our abilities and your looks, and we're going to put them together, and we're going to the best of both worlds. And they've been able to manipulate that, and then we're going to come down and be superhuman people.
Right, and the question is, because this is still gray alien directed, these are the ones who are doing this program. This is their program. And the question is, why? What is the deal here? What do they want? And we don't know the answer to that.
You have any ideas?
No, I don't. I mean, the hybrids don't know the answer to that. All they know is that their function is to live here.
Well, do you think Stephen Hawkins is saying, hey, they're going to come colonize, I can't even say that. They're going to come down
and colonize us.
And they're not going to be nice.
Well, I don't know. Did Stephen Hawkins say that exactly?
It was something very close to that.
Well,
don't go shaking their hands. Is that what he said?
Yeah, something like that. Well, actually, I think Sir Francis Crick first said that some years back. I don't know if Stephen Hawking is aware of that, but this has been said, I think, by Sir Francis Crick of Crick and Watson, who discovered the structure of DNA. And the idea is, if you go hunting for aliens, you better, when you find them, you don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the problem here is that if you find aliens with any kind of technology at all, by searching the heavens, they automatically and absolutely and without question, except in some cases, must have a very, 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 very advanced technology. And if you find someone with that doesn't have that very, very advanced technology, they will have no technology whatsoever. Because our technology is brand new in cosmic time. It's only a couple of 100 years old, and the whole electronics industry, which has revolutionized the Earth, it only comes from World War II, and electric lights only come from the late 19th century. It's just our technology is in its fetal state. It's not even in its infancy. And what our technology will look like 1,000 years from now is unimaginable. In fact, it's almost unimaginable what it's going to look like 20 years from now or 50 years from now, considering the pace at which technology has changed. So if you have technology, the chances of it being right where we are, right at this tiny, 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 tiny nanosecond of time in terms of cosmic time where we are, is going to be remote. That possibility is going to be very small. Consequently, they either have a very advanced technology or no technology. See what I'm saying? I mean, there's no technology.
Right.
So you will be contacting a superior technological society if you're dealing with sentient beings who have technology, who have a civilization, all that. And then what Stephen Hawking says is, well, just compare what happened with Columbus and the Indians, and there's a million other instances in world history where an advanced technological society from Europe meets up with people who are, who have bows and arrows, and that's it. And that society, the smaller society, the less technological society, almost always either suffers drastically or disappears. Now, in recent years, of course, we've tried to keep that from happening with Latin American tribes and all that. But the fact is that that's what he's alluding to. What he doesn't understand is that there's a UFO and abduction phenomenon. And, in fact, we are seeing that to a degree, a degree that we would never have sort of expected. But I do think that he's right, that when I look at the future with this phenomenon, what I want is for us to be able to control them, not them to control us. That's what I want. I don't like that the way they have things set up.
And it doesn't sound like that's what's going on. I mean, okay, referring to something else you've said before, okay, I'm a human. I am a human. I am not an abductee. I'm an earthling. I'm not an experiencer. I'm not a contactee. I'm none of those. I'm not a hybrid, and I'm not a gray. I'm not an alien that I know of.
Right.
So as a human, and as this all takes place, and it's coming soon, as they say, I'm probably, like right now, I think this is great. No one's taking me up and doing any of these sexual things to me, or I don't have to have these fears that this is going to occur to me either. And I feel like that this is good. Yet it sounds like what is coming soon, I might want to be an abductee. I might be one of the ones they take care of because I am not human only.
That is a dynamite statement.
Thank you.
The question is this. Abductees, they're heavily invested in abductees. In other words, they spend an enormous amount of time and energy with abductees. Being an abductee is not just being abducted. There's a lot more to it than that.
Do you know?
Next book will describe some of that stuff.
Okay.
But the fact is that they are special people, and the question then is, if there is an integration into the society, what happens to non-abductees? And I don't know the answer to that. I hope nothing, but non-abductees. You see, it's just the way this phenomenon works is it's intergenerational. So if your mother or your father was an abductee, you will be an abductee. It was probably random in the beginning, and it probably started in the late 19th century. At the same time, if an abductee marries a non-abductee, and most abductees, maybe 95% of them, maybe 99% of them, don't know that they're abductees. But if an abductee marries a non-abductee and they have a couple of kids, the chances are that the kids will be abductees also. And if they then get married to somebody who's a non-abductee, their kids will be abductees. So what you get is a spreading out laterally across the globe, and this is a global phenomenon. It is not an American phenomenon. And you also get a longitudinal kind of phenomenon through the ages, through the generations. So now, does that mean that eventually everybody will be an abductee, or do they only need a critical amount of people to be abductees to help them in their integration program? And if that's the case, then what happens to the non-abductees?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that, but
we'll find out, possibly.
We will find out, I think. I hope we won't. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I don't know what I'm talking about. I'll take that. I can stand there with 185,000 pounds of egg on my face, a lifetime of egg on my face. I'll take it.
You know, a real quick question here is, how do they? I know generation after generation, you know, they'll keep kind of sticking with, I guess, the bloodline, the DNA, the genetics, whatever they choose from there by going in with family. But how did they pick the first one? Did they say we want all red hair, or did they say we all want, was there any specification?
Right. I don't know the answer to that. I had one person tell me that in the beginning there was a sort of, not a virus, but some sort of microbe. There was something released into the atmosphere, and those people who absorbed it were taken as abductees, and those people who did not were not. I don't know whether that's true or not. It sounds kind of funny to me, and so I really don't know. But whatever it was almost certainly random, because it is a random phenomenon now. Mm-hmm. Because people don't know they're abductees; they get married to anybody they want to, and so. I've had people tell me that only American Indians are abductees. Only people with Celtic or Irish blood are abductees. Only people who have royal blood in their lineage somewhere are abductees. On and on and on and on. And I know that this is a completely random phenomenon because people get married to whoever they want,
Right.
And people have said, well, what about blood? Is the blood type the same? Well, not. From what I can tell, it's every form of blood type. Now, there might be something buried deep within the brain, some alteration that would make somebody an abductee. I don't know that. These are money questions ultimately, and my bank account just doesn't have the millions that it would take to find these things out. So, and like I said, I don't take any money for anything I do, and never have. So it's what's called a negative cash flow business.
You got that right.
Out of my bank account.
You got that right. You didn't marry the rich woman? I thought that was every man's plan.
We're both working to support my habits.
Well, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to High Strangeness. I'm Connie Willis, and we are talking with Dr. David Jacobs. If you would like to ask him a question, the number to call is 1-800-STRANGE, 1-800-STRANGE. And I'm sure he will welcome those phone calls from you and those questions. I have a question for you here before we do head off into a break here. As you know, our show is all about going on location as well, being there first and getting all the emotion as well as the shock of what occurs with people and the different events that are happening with High Strangeness. I'd like to ask you if, and we're going to do this live, if you're upset with me, you can go ahead and just let it out. Go ahead, David, it's okay. But I'd like to ask if you could arrange for us to do a live hypnosis setting with or session with an abductee that also agrees, and if we could do a full session with you live.
Well, probably not.
No.
Because the problem here is that the abductee does not know what he or she is going to say, doesn't know what they're going to remember, and there could be embarrassing things that they're not prepared for, and I just can't do that ethically. It's just too private in an odd way, and so.
If they agreed to it,
well,
would that be okay? Or if it was taped and we cut out any sexual.
I would strongly urge them not to agree with something like that.
Yeah.
Strongly. Now, I have done hypnosis with abductees on television. I hate doing it. I must say, I really hate it. I hate it. Yeah. Well, it's.
Well, I'm looking at it. It's adding credibility. People are like, "Oh, this guy. He's, come on. He's doing it all behind closed doors."
I've done it a bunch of times on television, and I've gotten to the point where I tell them no. It's the one thing I won't do anymore. But what I'll do is we'll go over an event sometimes that has happened before, and they'll basically remember the same thing they remembered before.
Right, of course,
basically
right.
Enough.
Makes sense.
But which is actually a pretty good check to see how much their memory has degraded after they have remembered it consciously. But because it degrades anyway, but not at the same pace as if you remember things consciously.
Right. Okay.
So, I'm going to have to say probably not, and I always say probably because I never know.
Okay,
but the
good.
answer is going to be
all right. You're going to think about it. Okay, you're going to think about it though. It's
I
in your head.
I probably won't even think about it.
Okay. See, he's an honest man, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we'll be right back. You're listening to High Strangeness. I'm Connie Willis. The number to call, 1-800-STRANGE. Talking with David Jacobs. I had to ask that, I thought that would be fantastic, though. I mean, gosh, I hope maybe one day. And I'm only thinking about that for credibility reasons, that's all.
I've done it a million times already. And I can't stand it. I just hate it. I hate it.
Connie Willis, the podcast. Join Connie's other shows at ConnieWillis.com.